October 14, 2017. It was a Tuesday night, 7:45 p.m., and the rain came down in sheets on Main Street in Cedar Falls. Most folks were home, but the lights of Miller's Diner glowed through the storm, a place where truckers, night shift workers, and families found comfort. In the far corner booth, Richard Carter sat quietly, his jacket damp from the rain, his hands rough from years of hard work. At 52, life had worn him down, but it hadn't broken him. He had a way of sitting still, as if the world could be spinning fast around him, and he'd remain anchored. Across the booth sat a man who didn't fit the place. Expensive suit, polished watch, hair neatly combed back. He placed an envelope on the table, thick, heavy, the kind that makes people stop breathing for a moment. You didn't have to open it to know what was inside. It was money. A lot of it. The stranger slid it across the table with confidence, like he had done this before, certain that no one would ever refuse. Most people wouldn't. Most people couldn't. Richard looked at the envelope, his jaw tightening. The sound of forks and plates clattered faintly in the background, the hum of the neon sign buzzing above. But at that table, it felt like the entire diner had gone silent, waiting for him to pick it up. Instead, Richard pushed it back. No hesitation. No confusion. Just a steady hand, as if the decision was already made before he even walked in. The man across from him leaned back, stunned. In all his years, he had never seen someone turn down that kind of money. And then Richard spoke. His voice was low, almost tired, but unshakably firm. What he asked for instead wasn't something you could fold into an envelope. It wasn't something money could buy. It was worth far more than every dollar inside that stack. Richard Carter was born on May 22, 1965, in a small town just outside Des Moines, Iowa. He grew up in a modest home where the sound of his father's old radio filled the kitchen and his mother's hands were always busy with sewing to make ends meet. Life was never easy, but it was honest. As a boy, Richard worked odd jobs, mowing lawns, cleaning yards, helping at the local hardware store, never complaining, never asking for more than he was given. His parents taught him that money could pay bills, but character was what people remembered when the bills were gone. By 19, Richard was working full-time at a construction site. The paychecks were small, the hours long, but he had something many didn't, a reputation. Folks around town trusted him. If Richard said he'd be there at 6, he'd be there at 5:30. If he shook your hand, the deal was as solid as any contract. People said he wasn't just working to earn a living, he was working to earn respect. Still, life tested him. There were layoffs, broken trucks, and winters where heating the house meant cutting back on food. But through it all, he carried himself with quiet pride. He married young, built a family, and though the years etched lines on his face, they also carved depth into his character. By the time he sat in that diner on that rainy October night, Richard had lived a life where every dollar mattered, yet he understood something most people never stopped to think about. Money wasn't the measure of a man. And that's why, when the envelope slid across the table, he didn't see opportunity the way most would. He saw a test. And for Richard Carter, the answer was already written in the kind of man he had been since childhood. The diner clock showed 8:02 p.m. when the stranger leaned forward, resting one hand on the envelope. His voice was calm, measured, the kind of voice that carried weight without needing to be raised. He introduced himself only as Mr. Grant, a businessman passing through town, and with every word he spoke, it became clear that the envelope wasn't a random gesture. This was deliberate. He told Richard that inside was $25,000 in cash, no strings attached, enough to clear most debts or give a man like him a fresh start. Grant slid the envelope closer again, his silver cufflinks catching the faint light from the overhead lamp. Richard's eyes flicked down at it, then back up, steady and unshaken. He didn't reach out. Grant noticed the hesitation and pressed further. He said he had watched men all across the country accept envelopes like this without a second thought, calling it a gift of fortune. But his words didn't move Richard. The older man's calloused hands stayed folded, his weathered face calm but unreadable. To Grant, this was unusual, maybe even unsettling. To Richard, it was simple. The room felt quiet, almost too quiet, as if even the rain outside had slowed to listen. A waitress walked by with a pot of coffee, her eyes catching the scene for a moment, sensing something heavy in the air. She didn't stop, but she glanced back once before heading to the counter. Grant lowered his voice then, speaking like a man trying to tempt someone who shouldn't resist. He said this money could buy comfort, it could buy time, it could buy relief from the weight Richard had carried for years. He called it a chance most people prayed for. Richard finally spoke, his tone even, almost gentle. He said, "I'm not here to sell myself." The words hung in the air, sharp in their simplicity. Grant pulled back slightly, as though the refusal stung more than he expected. The envelope stayed on the table, untouched, heavy not just with bills but with a choice Richard had already made long before that night. He wasn't refusing out of pride. He wasn't refusing because he couldn't use the money. He was refusing because what he valued couldn't be stacked, sealed, or counted. And that was when Grant leaned back in his seat, studying Richard with new eyes, realizing this wasn't going to be an ordinary exchange. Something far greater was about to unfold. The seconds after Richard's quiet words felt heavier than the envelope itself. Mr. Grant leaned forward again, almost as if he hadn't heard right, and asked Richard if he understood what he was turning down. Richard nodded once, his gaze steady, and said softly, "I've gone without before. Money doesn't scare me. What scares me is forgetting what truly matters." Grant frowned, puzzled, and pressed him. What could matter more than security, more than being free of worry? That was when Richard spoke with a weight that seemed to come from years of living. He said, "Money can pay for a bed, but it can't buy sleep. It can buy medicine, but it can't buy health. It can put food on the table, but it can't make a family sit together and share it. What I need most isn't in that envelope." The diner around them carried on as usual, but there was a strange stillness at their table. A couple at the counter laughed over pie, a trucker paid his bill, the waitress refilled a cup of coffee. None of them knew that in that booth, a man was rejecting what so many would have taken without a thought. Richard didn't speak with bitterness, nor did he brag about his choice. His voice carried only sincerity, the kind that left no room for doubt. Mr. Grant studied him, tapping his fingers lightly against the edge of the table. He had met men who begged for less, men who would trade their dignity for a fraction of what he offered. Yet here was Richard, worn from years of struggle, his clothes plain, his hands rough from labor, calmly saying no. It wasn't defiance. It was conviction. Grant asked him again, almost testing the firmness of his resolve. "If not this, then what?" Richard paused, his eyes softening as though the answer had always been close to his heart. "What I want," he said, "is something you can't hand over in an envelope. I want time, time with my family, time that isn't stolen by worry, time that can't be bought or bargained with." His words were quiet, but they cut through the noise of the diner like a bell. Grant leaned back, silent now, his offer still untouched on the table. For the first time that evening, it wasn't Richard who looked unsettled. It was the man who thought money could buy anything. Richard let the silence stretch for a moment, his weathered hands resting on the edge of the table as if weighing the value of what he was about to say. He leaned forward just slightly, lowering his voice so that only Mr. Grant could hear. "I don't want your money," he said. "What I need is a promise." Grant raised his brows, the confusion on his face clear. Richard continued, his tone steady, but his eyes carried years of quiet longing. "If you really want to help me, don't give me bills to spend. Give me your word that you'll show up for the people who matter in your life. Don't let work, or success, or money keep you from them. Don't let them sit at a table waiting for a father who never comes home, or a child who learns to stop asking if you'll be there. What I want, what I ask of you, is that you give them your time. Because when it's gone, no amount of money can buy it back." Grant's expression softened, but he tried to mask it with a faint laugh, as though Richard was joking. Yet Richard's face didn't move. His jaw was set, his eyes unwavering. There was no jest in his request. The envelope of cash on the table now seemed out of place, like a meaningless token in the shadow of something far more valuable. The clatter of dishes and the hum of late-night chatter filled the diner, but their table existed in another space entirely. Still, weighty, and almost sacred. Grant asked him why he would ask something for someone else when he himself had so little. Richard shook his head and replied with quiet certainty, "Because I've seen what happens when fathers think money is enough. I've seen families with full wallets and empty hearts. I'd rather see you walk away tonight with your money and keep the people who love you close, than take your offer and lose the only thing I can't replace." For a long moment, neither man spoke. Grant looked down at the envelope, then back at Richard, and for the first time in years, he didn't have an answer ready. The power had shifted. The man with less had shown him what it meant to have everything. Mr. Grant drove home that night with the envelope untouched on the passenger seat, but his mind wasn't on the money. The streetlights flickered across his windshield as he replayed Richard's words again and again, each one cutting deeper than the last. He walked into his house just after 11 p.m., the sound of silence greeting him. The dining table was still set, plates cold, glasses half full. A note sat in the middle, written in his wife's handwriting. "We waited, but the kids had to go to bed. Maybe tomorrow." He stood there staring at the note, the weight of it heavier than any business decision he had ever made. Upstairs, he could hear the faint breathing of his children, already asleep, already used to his absence. For the first time in years, he felt like a stranger in his own home. He sat down at the table, loosening his tie, his hand resting on the untouched dinner plate. The house around him was quiet, but his chest carried a storm of guilt and realization. He thought of Richard's tired eyes, the conviction in his voice when he said time could never be bought back. The CEO who once believed everything had a price suddenly felt bankrupt in the one currency that mattered most. He could close deals worth millions, but he couldn't buy back the bedtime stories he'd missed, the birthdays he'd skipped, the moments his kids stopped asking if he'd be there. For the first time, Mr. Grant didn't feel powerful. He felt small, like a man standing at the edge of something he was close to losing forever. And with that fear came clarity. Richard hadn't refused money because he didn't need it. He refused because he wanted Grant to see the one thing his wealth could never fix. The night stretched on, and Grant remained at that table, staring at the cold food before him, realizing it wasn't just dinner he had missed. It was life itself, slipping through his fingers one late night at a time. The next morning, just after 7 a.m., the office staff arrived expecting another ordinary day. The lobby buzzed with the usual chatter of coffee cups and elevator doors, but whispers spread quickly when they saw the CEO himself standing by the entrance. Mr. Grant, still in his tailored suit, but without his usual shield of pride, greeted employees one by one, his voice quieter, his tone unfamiliar. Some exchanged confused glances, unsure what had come over the man who once only cared about numbers on a screen. By 9 a.m., he gathered everyone in the main conference room. The tension was thick as people shuffled into their seats, eyes locked on the CEO who stood at the front without a prepared speech or even a stack of notes. Instead, he rested his hands on the podium and looked around the room at faces that had worked for him, day and night, faces that had given their time while he had treated time as disposable. After a pause, he spoke in a way that caught even the most skeptical employees off guard. He admitted that he had been wrong, that for too long he measured success by profits, ignoring the moments that truly mattered. And then, with a steady voice, he shared Richard's request. How a man who had nothing asked for something far more valuable than money. The room was silent, every ear tuned to his words as he revealed the lesson he had been forced to confront. Some of the staff glanced at each other, stunned that the CEO was exposing not power, but humility. It wasn't just a speech. It was a shift. The employees in that room didn't leave talking about targets or deadlines. They left thinking about their own lives, their own families, the minutes and hours that could never be bought back. And as for Mr. Grant, that day marked the first time his wealth didn't define him. What defined him was a lesson he almost missed. One that came not from a boardroom, but from a man with a mop and a truth too powerful to ignore. The room fell still as Richard's words echoed in the air. The CEO, a man surrounded by wealth, power, and influence, was caught off guard. He had expected a request for money, a favor, maybe even a position. But this was something no one had ever asked him before. Richard didn't want bonuses or luxury. He didn't want the kind of success people flaunted on magazine covers. All he wanted was something that could never be stacked in a vault or printed on paper. He wanted time. Time to see his daughter grow, time to live without trading every moment of his life for someone else's gain, time to hold on to the things money could never replace. The CEO leaned back, speechless, as if the world outside the glass windows suddenly didn't matter. The city lights twinkled below, a reminder of just how fleeting it all was. For once, the man who owned almost everything realized he had overlooked the very thing Richard was asking for. And in that silence, one truth became impossible to ignore. Money loses its shine when weighed against the seconds we can never get back. If you're listening right now, ask yourself this: what would you choose if you were in Richard's shoes? Because sometimes the most priceless thing we can fight for isn't found in a paycheck, but in the moments that slip through our fingers every day. If you found this story powerful, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss stories like this.